Howdy fishing folk, are you just now getting started on fishing, or have you been enjoying fishing for a while and you're curious as to what all the fuss is about for bait casters? Well, in today's video I'm going to explain to you the specific advantages that bait casters give you over other reels and the specific parts that allow them to do so. But before we get started, I want to ask you guys to leave me a comment below on what your general opinion of bait casters already is. Now let's get to it. Let's go ahead and move to our little pad here and explain the advantage that the Baitcaster has over other reels. And to simply summarize it, you have complete control over your entire system. And what do I mean by complete control? What I mean is you have complete control of your line and your bait from cast to catching a fish and to retrieving. You have all sorts of options as far as controls go. And let's just go ahead and get started with the spool. Now, since the spool is the rotating part that brings the line in versus some kind of a large rotating assembly like on a spinning setup here, it allows us to have a much smaller profile of a reel. Now this allows us to use smaller parts and make the overall reel smaller so it fits in your hand and it has less mass to be holding up all day. Now the spool being open and within reach of our thumb allows us to control the speed of our cast, which gives us two distinct advantages. The first being able to control backlashes, and that's when the spool is going faster than the lure itself is, and that causes a bunch up of line right here. Now we can slow down our spool with our thumb and keep that from happening. And the other advantage is when we're making cast, we can actually over target our initial cast and then use our thumb to feather in the distance to just the precise moment where we want the bait to hit the water. Now to me, I believe bait casters are specifically designed for their accuracy in casting. I can cast really far with a spinning reel setup, but I can cast a whole lot more accurate with a bait caster. We talked a little bit about the smaller profile. Let's move on over here to our sheet of paper where you guys can get a little better view of this. The smaller profile allows the reel to fit in your hand very easily. I can completely grasp this, and I really don't even have that big of hands, to be honest with you. Definitely not any kind of quarterback or NBA star by those regards, but anyways, this allows me to put my finger touching the line as I'm reeling in. Now that gives me extra sensitivity over what's going on the other end of my line. And I can feel any pressure changes, whether I'm going over a rock or a tree limb, or if something doesn't feel quite right and I need to set the hook. And that is a big advantage for me over any of the other reel setups, as I can feel that line and have that extra sensitivity right at my fingertips. I did mention that even during fighting fish, you have complete control over your bait caster, including the drag. So while I'm here fighting a fish and he's got me pinned to where I'm not allowing much line off and I'm afraid I'm going to break, I can easily, while I'm reeling in, adjust the drag and allow him to take more fishing line and less likely to break him off. So I love that about bait casters. Instead of having to reach around and adjust the drag, it is simply at my thumb and I can adjust the drag that way. So before moving on, I kind of want to recap all of the advantages we have. The first being the drag adjustment being quickly available. Now that makes it really handy when you're fighting a fish. So drag adjustment is one of the things I like to put down here for advantages. Next, we want to talk about spool speed control. Now that allows us to prevent backlashes. It also allows us to have very precise cast. Now that's very important in bass fishing. If you've done a lot of bass fishing, you know precise cast makes all the difference whether or not you're going to get where that fish is or not. And lastly here, and not least by any means, is the small profile that a baitcaster has, and that gives you the ability to have that extra sense on your fishing line, be able to put your fingers on it and actually literally feel the bite. Before moving on, I would love if you join the rest of the Fishing Folk family by smashing that subscribe button. Here on Clearwater Fishing, I love to make content that is clear, simple, and easy to understand and apply. Even those highly advanced topics that, heck, even I struggle with from time to time. I like to bring them down to the everyday person's level so they can go out and have a great time fishing. Now let's go ahead and move on to the section of this video talking about the Baitcaster's parts. And I'm going to go ahead and label this corner over here parts. That way it is clear as to what we're talking about. Now to give you guys a sense of what we're looking at here, this Baitcaster is what I would consider a mid-grade Baitcaster. It cost about $180, which is, you know, pretty good price for any piece of fishing equipment. This one is a 13 Fishing Concept A. And let's go ahead and start this by talking about the handles. Now, handles need to be comfortable in your hands. These are cork handles, which I really do like. These are an upgraded version of typical handles here, and they have ball bearings in them, which make them extra smooth and makes them easy to use for numerous hours. Moving further down here, we have this star piece that we talked about earlier, and this is the drag control. By rotating it clockwise, we make the drag harder or more strength. It takes a little more pressure to pull the line out, and then we can loosen it as well, which makes it easier. While we're over here, let's talk about this knob here. Let's take a little note here. We talked about the drag, and now we're going to talk about the tensioning knob. Right there. Now this tensioning knob is extremely important when you're casting. It's not so important on the retrieves or any of the other methods, but when you're casting, having this tensioning knob dialed in helps you prevent backlashes. If you go watch any video that is worth watching on how to cast baitcasters, they tell you how to adjust that just perfectly each time with new baits. And obviously this is kind of the same as any of the other knobs on this thing. You know, clockwise you tighten it down, counterclockwise you loosen it. And this all this does is allows the spool to move more freely if you loosen it, and less freely if you tighten it down. Next, I want to talk about the gear ratio, since it's labeled right here. The gear ratio explains to you how fast of a retrieve that this reel can have. This one has a gear ratio of 7.3 to 1, and let's get this lined up to where it kind of makes sense for us to follow along. I've already kind of made a mark on here. What 7.3 to 1 means is for every complete rotation of the handle back to the starting position all the way around, the spool will spin 7.3 times. So since we have it lined up here and I have this little mark here, let's do a quick counter. Now let's there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I missed 6, there's 7, and then right about there you can kind of see our last marks right there at about a third. So that makes this a 7.3 to 1 gear ratio reel. Now they make different versions. They have 5s, 6s, 7s, and 8s. I don't know if I've ever seen a 9, but I know they probably exist out there. But I've seen 5 through 8 on a regular. Right here on the back and at the base, we have our spool release. This allows the line to come off the spool freely, and actually it goes either way if you want to, roll it back on for whatever reason with your thumb. And then whenever you turn the handle, it clicks the spool release back into position, and you're using your drag system again, and you can reel in with your handle. Now let's write that down. Spool release. We got two more things to talk about, and our marker is trying to run away on us. Let's talk about the braking system, and that's usually covered on the opposite side of the handle. And in this case, our system is a centrifugal braking system, which we can adjust from in here. You have a little dot on this 3, and we can adjust that to a 4, 5, 6, all the way down to a 0. In this case, 0 is the least amount of brakes and 6 is the most. And the faster it spins, the more brakes it engages. There's a couple different other designs as far as there's some magnetic brakes as well that use magnets in here. And there's even digital control brakes that uses a digital control chip to slow down your spool. Let's go ahead and write down brakes since we just talked about them. Hopefully that clears up some stuff about the brake system being on this side. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the line guide. The line guide is very important for making sure the line is distributed evenly on your spool. And as you retrieve here, the line guide is going to shift from left to right and then right back to left using a worm gear. And you can see that the line is getting distributed on evenly. I'm going to pull it back out using the drag. And you can see it's clearly putting the line on evenly. If you made it this far in the video, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you're interested in learning how to cast a baitcaster or what line you should be putting on your very first baitcaster, check out these two videos. But until next time, I'll see you later, fishing fam.